الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على من بعثه الله رحمة للعالمين. To proceed, once again, we resume the series that we started on how the fitna in Yemen all began and how certain mashayikh got involved. This is so ليهلك من هلك عن بينة ويحيى من حي عن بينة وإن الله لسميع عليم, that we all could be upon clarity regarding what has passed, and also السعيد من وعظ بغيره, that we can take life lessons and consideration from what has taken place of trials. This is only to increase us in awareness. إن الذين اتقوا إذا مسهم طائف من الشيطان تذكروا فإذا هم مبصرون. That the believer and the pious one, he increases in tabassur, he increases in insight after going through a phase of trials, of challenges of life and experiences, where he looks back and sees what has taken place. So my method of approach in doing so is presenting the timeline of events, so a person could see for himself and judge accordingly with an eye of insaf, of equity and justice and fairness, where a person looks into the affair with an open heart, asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala an yahdiyahu lima ikhtulifa fihi min al-haqqi bi'idhnih, asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to guide him in relation to what has occurred of differences of opinion. So today of this series, it is relation number 1 about how Shaykh Abdullah al-Bukhari got involved into the fitna in Yemen, or in other words, how did it begin, the refutations between him and also Shaykh Yahya ibn Ali al-Hajuri. Before going any further, I wanted to mention a side issue of a testimony for myself that I believe it was in the year 2007, if I remember correctly. I was contacting a number of scholars and mashayikh about the fitna in Yemen, and from those who I happened to contact was Shaykh Abdullah al-Bukhari. I called him on his cell phone. I was with a number of other individuals who were with me at that time. And I asked him, there are people warning from Damaj. Do you advise us to go to Damaj? Really, at that time, I was gathering statements of mashayikh against those who are warning. I was gathering statements. And I asked him on his opinion. And from what was apparent to me is that he kept refusing when I asked him, what's your view about Damaj? Do you advise to go to Damaj? He kept mentioning other centers of knowledge, and he kept insisting not to answer my question when I was asking him, do you advise to go to Damaj? So this is something that I wanted to mention as a testimony for myself, that it was apparent at the year of 2007 or the year 2008 that Shaykh Abdullah al-Bukhari, what was apparent, he had a similar stance of Shaykh Ubayd al-Jabiri, of warning from Damaj, although he did not announce anything at that time. So I want to mention something further that took place so we can see the context and the timeline of events. So some time, months before the year 2009, 1431 Hijri calendar, Shaykh Abdullah Bukhari received a phone call from Indonesia asking about the visit of Shaykh Muhammad Mani' and also Shaykh Hassan Qasim al-Rimi. And this is how the affair of Shaykh Abdullah Bukhari got involved, mainly from this phone call. We will play parts of that phone conversation, which is about 45 minutes. The full phone conversation is available online for anyone who can return back to it, so they can see even further the context of speech as we play these parts, inshallah.
اتصل بشيخنا شيخ عبيد حفظه الله. فسأل الشيخ عن هذه الدورة، دورة الريمي هذا وبن مانع. نعم. فالشيخ قال أنا أنصحكم بعدم الحضور، فالرجلان نعم متلوثان بأفكار الحجوري.
So a questioner contacted Shaykh Ubayd al-Jabiri and asked about the visit, the upcoming visit of Shaykh Muhammad Mani' and also Shaykh Hassan Qasim al-Rimi at that time to Indonesia. And here it mentions that Shaykh Ubayd al-Jabiri has found an audio. He warns from those two, being that he says they are both polluted with the ideologies of Yahya ibn Ali al-Hajuri, as quoted.
نعم، ونصيحة الشيخ هكذا. والإشكال بارك الله فيكم يا شيخنا، الأخ لقمان قبل أيام اتصل بالشيخ ربيع. في طلب طبعا من الشيخ، فالشيخ قال أنتم لا تصطدموا معهم، نعم تكرموهم وتتلطفون بهم وهكذا.
So now he says, but the problem lies that another questioner, a person by the name Luqman, contacted Shaykh Rabi' asking him his advice concerning the visit of those two Yemeni Mashayikh coming. And here he mentions that Shaykh Rabi' advises not to clash with them and that you should be kind and polite towards them, and also that you should honor them. So here Shaykh Abdullah Bukhari was apparent that he objects to the advice of Shaykh Rabi' to these individuals by saying that it's not necessary for you to honor them.
فطبعا خلاف كلام شيخين شيخنا. أقول فيه خلاف بين كلام شيخين.
So here now the person addressing or speaking to Shaykh Abdullah Bukhari tells them that there is clear contradiction between Shaykh Ubayd al-Jabiri's speech and also Shaykh Rabi''s speech concerning the upcoming visit.
الإخوة متحيرين. لا على كل حال شيخنا الشيخ ربيع يريد يعني لأنه إذا حصل بينكم صدام سيشوش هذا على دعوتكم وعلى الدعوة.
So the person speaking to Shaykh Abdullah Bukhari says that brothers are in a state of confusion as a result of those two speech. So Shaykh Abdullah Bukhari here says that Shaykh Rabi' intends that you do not have a clash, for verily it will have a bad impact upon your da'wah. Also from what is mentioned in this phone conversation is the following.
نعم. طبعا هناك وصل إلينا كلام يحيى الحجوري أنه يحذر من الحضور في دورتنا شيخنا.
So the person speaking to Shaykh Abdullah Bukhari from Indonesia says that it has reached us that Yahya al-Hajuri warns from their dawrah, that they were setting up the conference.
على كل حال إن حذر فهو المحذر منه وهو المخذول بهذا الكلام. يحذر لماذا؟ إيش ننشر بدعة نحن؟ يقول هذه الدورة حزبية وأقامها الحزبيون.
So Shaykh Abdullah Bukhari responds by saying, in all cases, if he warns from it, then he is the one that's being warned from. He says, what are we distributing or propagating innovations? And he says, why does he warn from this dawrah, this conference? And then the person says that it is his statement saying that it is organized by hizbiyun, people of biased partisanship. So here Shaykh Abdullah Bukhari responds by saying, he has indeed lied and has become wicked, and maybe a stone be thrown into his mouth.
إن قال هذا وثبت عنه فهذا كذب وفجور محض. طلابه لا يشركون عليه.
He says, if this is the case, if it is affirmed that he said this,
من الله ما يستحقون جميعا وكذبوا جميعا هم وشيخهم الذي ثبت عنه هذا الكلام قتلهم الله جميعا.
So here he goes on to say, may Allah give them all what they deserve, them and their teacher, if this is affirmed on them. And then he goes on to say, قَاتَلَهُمُ اللَّهُ جَمِيعًا, which means may Allah fight against them all. Also from what takes place in this audio of this phone call is the following.
احرصوا على أن يكون كذلك إن شاء الله وأحاولوا أنكم لا تشتغلوا بهؤلاء وكما قلت لك من لم يأخذ كلام الشيخ ولم يحترم كلام الشيخ فلا تعتبروا به ولا كرامة.
He's speaking about the advice of Shaykh Rabi', saying that whoever doesn't take his advice, then for him no honor, absolutely.
طيب جزاكم الله خير شيخنا. آمين. الشيخ أوصى الجميع ووصيته يجب أن تنفذ.
He says that the Shaykh gave a recommendation or an advice to all, and it's mandatory. He says wajib, that it's executed, this advice.
من أراد أن يأخذ بها سعيد ومن لم يأخذ بها أثم.
He goes on to say that whoever desires to take this advice becomes happy, and whoever does not, then he falls into sin. Also from what takes place in this phone conversation is the following.
ما هو يأتي من دماج؟ إيش دماج؟ ماذا فيها يعني؟ كل من جاءها ولا مر عليها صار سنيا سلفيا في عهد مقبل ما كانت كذلك.
So he goes on to say, to justify what his criticism about Damaj by saying, what is this Damaj? It's not the case that everyone that comes from it is Salafi. It wasn't that the affair when Sheikh Muqbil was there running it. So he goes on to mention the affair that is relation to Sheikh Muqbil's era.
تكون في عهد هذا كذلك؟ نحن كنا إذا جاءنا رجل في أيام الشيخ مقبل من دماج نوعا ما لا نسيء الظن فيه لأننا نعرف موقف الشيخ رحمه الله سابقا من بلد التوحيد والسنة وبلادنا هذه صحيح؟ نعم. ومواقفه رحمه الله تلك التي ما كانت تسر سنيا وما كان يوافقه عليها أحد من العلماء.
So he goes on to speak about the affair of Sheikh Muqbil, and that his speech towards Saudiya, and that none from the scholars was in agreement about him.
الشيخ بن باز ولا ابن عثيمين ولا ربيع ولا غيرهم صحيح؟ نعم. سبه وشتمه على بلد التوحيد وللملك فهد رحمه الله.
He says here that he had sab and insult, and he was cursing, and he said the land of Tawheed and the king of Fahad. So he added that he was cursing the land of Tawheed, and also the king of Fahd.
وغيرهم رجل صالح تاب قبل أن يموت بشهرين.
He says about him that his affair was that he was a righteous man that died, or that repented 2 months before he died.
ولذلك ما كل من جاءنا كان من دماجنا على أنه سني، كلهم قد نظن أن الناس هكذا أفكارها متأثرة بشيخها أنهم خوارج في هذا الفكر. في ذلك
He mentions that as a result we didn't have thoughts that everyone that comes from the center of the Madh is Sunni. We had fear that they were affected or polluted by their shaykh and the ideology of the Khawarij, that they were Khawarij in this affair.
كالعهد نحن ما أحسننا الظن بكل من جاء ولا أسأنا الظن بكل من جاء، نتوقف في أمره ما ندري إيش يكون. الآن في هذا العصر يبغانا نثق بكل من خرج من تلك الدار، وفي هذه السفاهات وفي هذا الحمق والتكالب على مشايخ أهل السنة.
So he said if this is the case at the time of Shaykh Muqbil, we didn't hold everyone that comes from there as being Sunni, we would hold back. And he says if that was the case for that time, imagine now where it is occurring therein, this foolishness and stupidity and these statements concerning a group of mashayikh.
وسب الشيخ عبيد وكل وشيخ اليمن وصابي وما أدري من، إيش الكلام الفارغ هذا؟ فيا أخي أكرر لا تشتغلوا بهؤلاء السفهاء.
So he mentioned in particular the insult relating to Sheikh Ubaid, and also he said Sheikh Muhammad Abdul Wahhab al-Wasabi, and he said I don't know who else. All of this is speech that is idle speech and void, and he advises not to waste your time with these foolish ones. He describes them, Sufaha. And then at the end of the phone conversation, this is what took place.
هذه سجلتم هذه المكالمة؟ نعم شيخنا سجلنا. يكون بينكم فقط هذا.
So he asked them, did you record this phone conversation of ours? So they said, yes, we recorded it. Then he says, keep this between us.
خرج إلى غيركم. طيب شيخنا. نعم ولا يشاع بارك الله فيكم ولا يخرج. طيب. الذي استمع يكفي. نعم بارك الله فيكم. لا يخرج شيء من هذا الكلام. نعم شيخنا.
So he says that it should not be distributed. Those who've heard it, it's sufficient for them, but it should not get out to others.
حياكم الله. جزاكم الله خير. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. عليكم السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته.
However, someone from them end up distributing it anyways. So after this, Shaykh Yahya responded to this audio once it got out and made public. And this is the first instance that Shaykh Yahya mentions Abdullah Bukhari by name. So we can see clearly how it started by Shaykh Yahya mentioning Abdullah Bukhari by name, even though it was harsh, but this is as a result of that audio that got out.
حين أن أراد الشيخ محمد مانع والشيخ حسن بن قاسم الذهاب دعوة إلى أندونيسيا، اتصل له بعض الحزبيين اللقمانيين من هناك أو من جنسهم وشكوا عليه هذه الطارئة والنازلة، وهي نازلة ذهاب الشيخين للدعوة إلى الله وتعليم الناس هناك.
So Shaykh Yahya mentions and clarifies the reason for this audio. That's this group of those followers of Luqman who are known for Hizbiyya and in Indonesia made a phone call to him complaining to him about this emergency affair of two mashayikh of Sheikh Muhammad Mani and Sheikh Hassan Qasim al-Raymi coming to Indonesia for da'wah.
وانزعج انزعاجا شديدا. البخاري انزعج بل أصيب بذعر.
And he said as a result, Sheikh Abdullah Bukhari became really irritated, and he was as if he was taken by fear.
من كونه ما ينزلان هناك. وجعل يتكلم تارة على الشيخ رحمه الله وأن طلابه صاروا على مساره في أنهم خوارج.
He was as if he was taken by fear in relation to the upcoming visit of those two mashayikh, and he was speaking with speech at times in relation to Sheikh Muqbil that him and his students were having the ideology of the Khawarij.
ويحذر من الدار ويتكلم كلام شبه من جنس كلام المجانين.
And also along with that he was warning from the center of Dammaj the speech of those who make no sense.
والله بلا خلفية ولا روية ولا علم ولا حلم ولا أيضا تحري في اللفظ من باب قول الله عز وجل وقل لعبادي يقول التي هي أحسن وقول الله عز وجل قولوا للناس حسنا وجعل يدافع بباطل عن الشيخ عبيد ومن قال في الشيخ عبيد كذا فهو كذا ومن قال فيه فكذا فهو كذا بغير أي برهان ولا أي رجوع إلى الردود السلفية العلمية ولا أي تمسك بها.
So he mentioned, Shaykh, that the speech of Sheikh Abdullah Bukhari wasn't based upon knowledge or in the background of affairs, and that he was just merely defending Sheikh Ubaid without going back to what was written and the evidences that were brought forward. This is what the Shaykh had mentioned. And yes, Shaykh had mentioned that he was harsh, and he clarifies in the same audio.
والله لو رفق في الكلام لرفقت به ولكن حين أن نسمع منه هذا الكلام وهذا البغي والتوسب من باب قول الله عز وجل وجزاء سيئة سيئة مثلها لا يحب الله الجهر بالسوء من القول إلا من ظلم.
So Shaykh says, if he was gentle in his words, I would have been gentle with him. But he says, what he has uttered of transgression and oppression, then it is from the angle of لا يحب الله الجهر بالسوء من القول إلا من ظلم. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not love for ill speech to be made in public except for the one who has been oppressed. Also he mentioned the verse وَجَزَاءُ سَيِّئَةٍ سَيِّئَةٌ مِثْلُهَا, that a person could repel a bad thing that occurred with another bad thing of that which is of its like. Also Shaykh in his response, he spoke about the affair of Sheikh Abdullah Bukhari requesting that the audio doesn't be distributed.
ومن كلامه يا إخوان يدل على جبنه يقول لهم سجلتم هذا الكلام قالوا لا تنشروه لا تنشروه خلوا بينكم لا تنشروه.
He says also from what indicates his cowardness is that he asked at the end, did you record this? Do not distribute it, do not distribute it.
والله ما أنا أتكلم الآن وأنشر على الشبكات أنشر لأنه حق لما
Shaykh says that when I speak, I distribute it and share it on the website because I know that is what I'm saying is of truth.
كلامك باطلا وبغيا وعدوانا وتوثبا وتطاولا يدسسون الكلام بينهم دسسة يتسللون به لواذا لا يريدون أن يسمعه من ينكر عليهم. إن كان عندك حق برزه على كتاب على شريط ردا علميا حي هذا. كم قد صورتم علينا من هذا الحزب الجديد يردون في الشبكات شبكة الوحلين وغيرها نرد ونبين أكاذيبهم ونبين ما تنتسون به ولا نبالي ونعلم أننا على طريق صحيح واضح بين سلفي لسنا نتهيب من المخالفين أجله.
So Shaykh mentions that when a person is guilty of doing wrongdoing and transgression, this is their state, that they just pass around speech amongst themselves and don't want it to get out. And he says, this is what you have been doing for people that have been refuting us on that mysterious website with anonymous names, al-wahyain. They're feeding off you, and he mentions that we will respond to them and we refute them publicly, because what we believe, what we're sharing, is of the truth.
أما هو فيتكلم ويجدع ويسب ويشتم ويدعو وما إلى ذلك من الكلام الذي ثم يقول في نهاية المطاف شكلت من قال لا تنشر هذا الكلام، لا تنشروه، ويحرض عليهم لا ينشروه. يا أخي كل سر جاوز الاثنين شاع، كل علم ليس في القرطاس ضاع.
So Shaykh says, as for him, he makes a number of insults, calls names, and then at the end of it, he comes and says, did you record this? Do not distribute it. And he makes a dramatic request onto them, not for them to distribute it. So the Shaykh says, oh my fellow brother, mentioning the saying that every secret that goes beyond two people is no longer a secret, and every knowledge that is not written is lost. Also, when Shaykh Abdullah Bukhari's audio got out of this phone conversation, he immediately made a clarification when attention was brought about what he said about Shaykh Mubil. And let's listen to the same response of Shaykh Yahya, what he said about that clarification.
وبدأ ينشر بعض الكلام على أني ما قلت ولا قصدت ولا عنيت ولا كذا، كل هذا كيف ما قصدت؟ كلامك واضح كوضوح الشمس في رابعة النهار.
And he began to say that he distributed words after about his speech that he didn't intended and he didn't mean. So the Shaykh said, how did you say so? Your speech was clear, like the clarity of the sun in midday.
تكلم على أهل السنة، تكلم على الشيخ على طلابه أنهم كانوا خوارج، أنكم ما تحسنون بهم الظن وأنكم كذا.
He spoke clearly about Ahl Sunnah from the Maj, spoke clearly about Shaykh Mubil, and that you don't have good thoughts about them. And then after that, Shaykh Abdullah Bukhari releases another speech, more specific. We'll listen to it.
أحد يبدع الجمال، يبدع بالبدن. إيش هذا الكلام؟ هذا الكلام ما يدري ما يخرج من رأسه كما قلت له. هم بدعوا من كان عليها وهو يحيى الحجوري.
So Shaykh Abdullah Bukhari, from his speech that he released, he was criticizing those who say that these ulama or these mashayikh that spoke about the Maj spoke about the whole of the Maj. So he says this person doesn't know what's coming out of his head. They did tabdi', declare innovative to the camels found therein, but they made an innovator, declared an innovator to Yahya ibn Ali al-Hajuri.
وكان كلام بعض أهل العلم فيه لهم أدلتهم وبيناتهم بارك الله فيكم.
And he mentions that this speech of the scholars concerning Yahya ibn Ali al-Hajuri, it is based upon proofs and evidence that they have.
وبينوا على ذلك وما كان التحذير من كل من في دماج، كان التحذير من أشخاص من دماج، صحيح؟ وإلا فلم يحذروا من جمع من المشايخ الفضلاء ممن كان في دماج، لكن الحجوري ما كان يمكنهم من التدريس ولا من التعليم وطردهم ونهاهم إلى غير ذلك ممن لم يوافقه.
So he says that it wasn't about everyone that was in the Maj, a warning, but it was in relation to, for example, Shaykh ibn Ali al-Hajuri. For it, he said there was a group of virtuous mashayikh that were in the Maj, that Shaykh did not give them a capability to teach, and that he even actually exiled them or kicked them out from the Maj, because merely they did not agree with Shaykh ibn Ali al-Hajuri on his position. I don't know who he's particularly referring to. Really, there was, from what I remember, Shaykh Ma'amar al-Qadasi, who didn't have the same opinion of Shaykh Yahya in relation to the fitna, but he also was from those who were allowed to teach. He taught Imla, and there was others of those mashayikh. I believe Shaykh Ahmed Wasabi used to teach Aqidat Wasatiyya. So I don't recall who he's referring to say these words to be exact and precise and fair. But we know other people who did not have the same opinion of Shaykh Yahya, they were still allowed to teach because they were not causing havoc or fitna, or what those other people that were forced to leave because of them causing drama and fitna and division within one markaz.
فانتبهوا بارك الله فيكم. كانت تأوي أناسا، نعم نحن كنا نحث لما كانت على السنة، نحث الذهاب إليها كغيرها من دور العلم، لكن لما انحرفت صيانة للشباب من الأمة، نحن عندما نعتقد زيد ولا عمرو من الناس هذا منحرف ولا مبتدع، كيف ندلك عليه؟ ما يجوز أن ندل، هذا غش.
So he mentions that he used to encourage people to go to the Majj, but now he doesn't. He says, how could a person, if he warns you from someone that he believes him to be astray, and then encourages you to go to him, this is considered to be a deception.
سائل يسأل ويقول ما نصيحتكم في قضية يحيى الحجوري فإن لنا في لندن شباب يدافعون عنه ويتبعونه أفيدونا أفادكم الله.
So a question has been read from London regarding Yahya ibn Ali al-Hajuri and those who are followers that still are with him. So this is the next time where Shaykh Abdullah Bukhari also got involved and more speech about Shaykh Yahya ibn Ali al-Hajuri. So from what Shaykh Abdullah Bukhari responded with, and the full audios of what I'm mentioning are found online for anyone to turn back to it for the full context.
ورميه للنبي عليه الصلاة والسلام بهذه الموبقة، بل وقوله بأمر أعظم حين أذن بنشر رسالة فيها التقرير بأن النبي عليه الصلاة والسلام لا يقبل قوله إلا بدليل. أي دليل تريد أيها القبيح عندما تطلب من رسول الله الدليل؟ أما نقول الكتاب والسنة؟ أي سنة هذه؟ سنة من؟ أما هي سنة النبي عليه الصلاة والسلام؟
So he mentions that the criticism against Shaykh Yahya, he says that he accused the Prophet ﷺ and that his statement from the destructive statements is his statement saying that the Prophet ﷺ, even though what's added in the audio afterwards, it's clear that we're going to play an audio of Shaykh Bahmid in relation to this, that the original audio says that Abdullah Bukhari says his statement, Shaykh Yahya's statement, that the Prophet ﷺ, his statement is not accepted except with a proof. But afterwards, the audio is edited. It's appeared that someone came to him or clarified to him that this is not the statement of Shaykh Yahya. But as they say, that it was a statement of someone else, that Shaykh Yahya gave permission for it to be distributed. So you can see in the same audio, it still didn't remove qawluhu, his statement of Shaykh Yahya, and it had it combined between both. So this is something to look into. For a person of fairness, we'll look into the matter and see that if this is truthful, something correct. Here we'll play what Shaykh Abdul Hamid pointed out about that.
قال ورميه للنبي صلى الله عليه وسلم بهذه الموبقة، بل وقوله بأمر أعظم حين أذن بنشر رسالة فيها التقرير لأن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم لا يقبل قوله إلا بالدليل. هذا القول منه أضيف مؤخرا.
So he mentioned the same thing. This is what happened, how Shaykh Abdul Hamid responded to him. He mentions that this part where it says that he gave permission of a treatise that had the statement to be distributed, he said this was added afterwards.
وإلا فعند فتواه زعم أن هذا القول قول الشيخ يحيى حفظه الله.
Or else the original verdict of Abdullah Bukhari, he claimed that this was the actual statement of Shaykh ibn al-Hajuri, that the statement of the Prophet ﷺ is not to be accepted except with a proof. And it's unfortunate because this became widespread and it passed on, and now to come to know that this is not the actual statement of Shaykh Yahya.
والذي يسمع المقطع الصوتي يظهر له ذلك. فالرجل كما
So if you listen clearly to the recording, you can see that it was added afterwards.
قلت لكم يلقن.
So he says, I've mentioned before that this person, Abdullah Bukhari, is someone that information is just merely passed on to him and he shares it, and he's referring to here the likes of Arafat and them.
من قبل الحزبيين ومن قبل المرعيين. فأطلق القول بأن الشيخ يحيى حفظه الله يقول النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم لا يقبل قوله إلا بدليل. فلما قالوا له هذا لم يقله الشيخ يحيى أو نبهوه تداركها في التسجيل. ثم أيضا هذا القول لم يقله الشيخ يحيى حفظه الله ولم يعتقده يوما من الدهر على ما بين هو بأسئلة أهل إبن.
So he mentions that Shaykh Yahya never said such a statement, and he clarified in a tape for the questions of the people of Ib. And also it's clear that someone who perhaps told Abdullah Bukhari this wasn't accurate, and it most looked like Arafat. Really, he's the one that has taken bits and pieces from the Fali Harbi people of refutations of Shaykh Yahya, also Abul Hasan al-Maribi, and put them together in one book and ascribed it to himself. And then later on, these mashayikh were given these points, and unfortunately, they have to correct an audio after saying something. So this is the situation. So a person could look into this further to examine. Also, from what Abdullah Bukhari responded with in this audio of his is the following statement.
أنا استمعت جاءني بعض الطلبة لما غر قرن أبي الفتن أبو الحسن المصري المأربي بدأت في
Just a side benefit, he mentions Abu al-Hasan as Abu al-Fitin. The first one to give him this nickname was Shaykh ibn Ali al-Hajuri. So just mention this as from angle giving credit where it deserves. And he does mention that the first to refute Abu al-Hasan was Shaykh ibn Ali al-Hajuri. We'll listen to that further.
في ذاك الوقت جاءني بعض الطلبة قالوا هذا يحيى الحجوري رد ومن عندهم في 3 أشرطة حتى يقال أنه أول من تكلم.
Just something for a person to know context. In the book of Abdullah Bukhari, Fath al-Rabbani, in refutation of Abu al-Hasan al-Sulaymani, he mentions that Abu al-Hasan al-Maribi came to him complaining about the criticism of Hajuri and others. So he says, فَطَلَبْنَا مِنْهُ إِثْبَاتَهُ عَلَيْهِمْ. So we requested from him to prove that the criticism of Hajuri and them is wrong. So this was mentioned, and the context looks apparent that the people that sent it to them were from these individuals who sent at that time the refutations of Shaykh ibn Ali al-Hajuri to Abdullah Bukhari. So he's hearing here that he listened to these audios of refutations, and we'll play some examples of that later on, but we're going to listen to what he says.
الأولية هنا مهمة المهم أن تتكلم بعلم ما تتكلم بجهل.
So he mentions the fact that he was the first to speak about al-Hasan al-Ma'ribi is not important, but what's important is that you speak with knowledge.
أول ولا آخر ولا وسط. الله جل وعلا يقول وإذا قلتم فاعدلوا. استمعت إلى هذه الثلاث أشرطة والله يا أخي أعوذ بالله ليتني لم أستمع إليها.
And he mentions this thing about being just when you speak. And then he says about these tapes, he says, أعوذ بالله. Only if I didn't listen to them.
من القبح الذي فيها.
He said of how repugnant, what I found of repugnant speech.
مع أنني رددت على أبي الحسن وأرى أنه من ضلال هذا الزمان. ومنحرف وكتبنا في هذا في الرد عليه.
He said, although I refuted Abu al-Hasan, I see him to be from those who went astray, and I wrote regarding that.
لكن يجب أن يكون الرد بعلم. الإمام ابن تيمية يقول كما في رد على البكري العلم شيئان إما نقل مصدق وإما بحث محقق وما سوى ذلك فهذيان مزور. العلم شيئان إما نقل محقق إما نقل مصدق وإما بحث محقق وما سوى ذلك فهذيان مزور. قم يا فلان ماذا عندك على ابن الحسن؟ عندي أنه كذا كذا كان يفعل ما أدري إيش تبا له ما أدري إيش قم أنت يا فلان عنده قصيدة بل عليه لا تبل عليه كله كذا.
So here he mentions that it's incumbent that the refutation be with knowledge. And after mentioning a quote of Ibn Taymiyyah, he gives an example of the refutation that of Shaykh Yahya, of those tapes. He said it was like a person just telling a person to get up and ask him, what do you have against Abu al-Hasan? And then he says, Tabban lahu, as words of showing disgrace to such a person, of wretchedness. And then he says that he requested someone else to come and read up lines of poetry. And then this person is saying, urinate on him. And then it was all about urinating. And he says, Kull al-kalam, all of the speech, like of Shaykh Yahya, was about urinate on them. This is what he says.
لا تبول كذا ما أدري إيش قبائح ألفاظ.
He said it was either about urinate and not urinate. He said it was about foul speech.
فلما سألني الإخوة بعد أن أعطوني بعد أيام قلت من أسوأ ما سمعت في حياتي هذه الأشرطة.
When he said he was asked about those brothers, about the tapes, and perhaps those people that sent him these tapes, he said that this is the most disgusting of things I've ever heard, or most wrongful of things that I've ever heard. So now let's go back to the audios of Shaykh Yahya. I'll give you titles of them, and you can, a person can return back to them himself. They're available on his website. The first one is تحذير أهل اليمن من فتنة أبي الحسن. This one is available, and it's quite long, and I believe it was in 2 tapes at that time. It's close to an hour and a half, to be precise, an hour and 19 minutes. So let's play some highlights from that, inshallah. As you can hear, this is from the beginning of it, and we can hear ayat so far, proofs and statements. We don't hear anything about urinate or foul speech as yet.
ولهذا من خالف الحق تراه ضلولا حقيرا. وقد هدانا رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم كما تواتر عنه جماعة من الصحابة، ومن أشهر ذلك حديث معاوية بن أبي سفيان رضي الله عنه أن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم قال: لا تزال طائفة على الحق ظاهرين. وما كانوا ظاهرين إلا بالحق، ولا يكون عن الحق بباطل ويزول له ذلك الظهور أو يستدر له أو يصلح ذلك الظهور. فأهل السنة دائما وأبدا يلازمون الحق.
So you can hear he even cites a hadith in that first part of it. Let's listen on further, also other parts in the audio.
والله سبحانه وتعالى يقول: لا تركنوا الذين ظلموا فتمسكوا بالنار. هذا رجل زائغ، والركون كل الآمة إلى الزائغين، وركون الإنسان المظلم إلى المظلم إلى الجاهل إلى المظلم، هذا يجعل ذلك الذي ركن عليه ظالما. قال الله سبحانه: ولو ترى إذ الظالمون موقوفون عند ربهم يرجع بعضهم إلى بعض القول يقول الذين استضعفوا الذين استكبروا لولا أنتم لكنا مؤمنين.
You can hear also another part in the audio ayah with a statement, and then it has an ayah to support it. So far we hear a knowledge-based refutation.
قال الذين استكبروا الذين استضعفوا أنحن صددناكم عن الهدى بعد إذ جاءكم بل كنتم مجرمين. الآيات المتبع والمتبع على الباطل كلهم ذنبا، وكلهم يعتبروا مجرمين.
He mentions, clarifying the reason why he mentions the verse, that the innovator to one another are wrongdoers, or in oppression to one another.
وانظر إلى الذين يتبعون بباطل استبرأ الذين اتبعوا من الذين اتبعوا ورأوا العذاب وتقطعت بهم الأسباب. وقال الذين اتبعوا: لو أن لنا كرة فنتبرأ منهم كما تبرأوا منا كذلك يريهم الله أعمالهم حسرات عليهم وما هم بخارجين من النار.
He mentioned another ayah that those who followed one another in wrongness, they're going to free themselves from that affair. So we can see another ayah in context or refutation, which is knowledge-based so far. Okay, now let's go to another tape of Shaykh Yahya refuting Abu al-Hasan al-Ma'ribi. Titled Al-Haqa'iq al-Jaliyya ala Makr Abu al-Hasan bid-Da'wat al-Salafiyya. So the clear realities and clarifying the deception of al-Hasan al-Ma'ribi to Da'wat al-Salafiyya.
أبو الحسن ما يحفظ 40 النووية، أقولها بصراحة وأتحداه أن ينكر هذا القول. أبو الحسن ما يحفظ 5 أجزاء من القرآن، أتحداه أن ينكر هذا القول.
He mentions that Abu al-Hasan al-Ma'ribi hasn't memorized 40 النووية. He said, I challenge him to deny this. And he says, he didn't memorize at least 5 juz from the Quran.
لا ما في. أقول كما قلنا لكم صاحب اتصالات وصاحب ماذا برمجة وصاحب سياسات وصاحب إحياء قواعد صلاح الصاوي من جديد.
He said he's known to be a person just from phone to phone, programs, politics, a person that is reviving the principles of Salah al-Sawi, of the Ikhwani.
يريد يحيي قواعد صلاح الصاوي على الدعوة السلفية ويبغيها عوجا وكثير على ما هو عليه، وإلا قال نبذها وهيج عليها العامة وأشباه العامة على الدعوة السلفية على منهج بنات، بل يلقب طلاب الشيخ قاطبة بأنهم حدادية وكأن.
And he said he accuses the students of Sheikh Muqbil to be Haddadis. And this is from the first who made this accusation was Abu al-Hasan al-Ma'ribi. Sheikh Ahmed Najmi was from those who defended the students of Sheikh Muqbil from this accusation. And his Sheikh brings a point against him that the people that Sheikh Muqbil has produced are these students before him. And he's accusing these people that Sheikh Muqbil has produced as being Haddadis. So this is from that tape. Also, Shaykh has another refutation titled كلمة الحق في الشيخ ربيع وجهوده في الرد على أبي الحسن, words of truth in relation to Shaykh Rabi' and his efforts of refuting Abu al-Hasan al-Maribi. Also he has a book, a refutation, in audio form of tape, al-Ibhaj fi naqd بعض أخطاء أبي الحسن المصري في كتابه السراج الوهاج. So clarifying critical errors of Abu al-Hasan al-Maribi in his book Siraj Wahaj, where he mentioned page for page. So when you listen to these tapes, you hear a knowledge-based refutation. And also, yes, maybe at the end of one of the two audios, or even both of them, there is a qasida. And this is known that from the time of Shaykh Muqbil, his refutations, he would encourage poetry also to be added in defense for the truth. So sometimes poets will get up and read words of poetry against these people who are fell into innovations. And sometimes it may be harsh, as found in some of the written poetry from the time of Shaykh Muqbil that were extremely harsh against opponents. So this is done, as is known in poetry sometimes. Words may be uttered more harsh than actual and nathar and literal wording. So this is done for emphasis. This is done for emphasis and is known from poetry. But to say that the whole audio was about urinate on him or to urinate, to be honest myself, I couldn't find this in the audio. I tried to listen to all of them, and I've been looking for this statement, couldn't find it. And suppose it did exist, to say that the whole audio is no longer a knowledge-based refutation because of one part in the audio that it did have this still would not be fair. But with that, we still didn't find this in the audio. Also, I wanted to mention quickly how Shaykh Ahmed Bazmul got involved in the fitna. It was found in the year 2013 that Shaykh Ahmed Bazmul came to Yemen to visit Fush, the markaz of Shaykh Abdurrahman al-Adani. And on that visit, he made public statements about Shaykh Yahya. So to be precise, it was in Jumad al-Ula, 1434, on a Saturday. And it was talks about manhaj. And he concluded his talk by saying, أنا أقول بارك الله فيكم قبل أن نختم هذه الكلمة المرجو من يحيى الحجوري أن لا يسلك هذا المسلك الوعر والمنزلق الخطر الذي سلكه في تهجمه على العلماء وعلى إخوانه طلاب العلم، وإلا فإننا ننتظر حكم العلماء فيه، وقد حكم عليه بعض العلماء. So he clearly comes and he mentions Shaykh Yahya by name and utters him in a long audio, and gets involved directly into the affair. This is what's mentioned. This is transcribed and is found online. And the audio has been shared as well. So it's been transcribed and also it's been shared in audio. Bear in mind, Ya Akhwa, that Ahmed Bazmul prior to the fitna in Yemen used to praise Shaykh Yahya.
ومنهجه وشيخ يحيى الحجوري أيضا هو معروف بعلمه وفضله وهو من طلاب الشيخ مقبل.
Very deeply.
So he mentions that he was known for his virtues and his knowledge. He's from the students of Shaykh Muqbil. And same thing, Shaykh Yahya, in some of his audios, when he was referring to the refutations on Ali Halabi, he gave reference to the book of Bazmul and requested for it to be shared. Also, at times when he was asked about a book, a refutation to certain hizb camps, he gave reference to the book of Ahmed Bazmul. This is available in audio as well. So this is upon us to keep our eyes open on what was the decisive factor to suddenly make this Shaykh Yahya, or these what they've said that he no longer has knowledge, or no longer has virtues, or all this time he was someone that had deviations with him. Also, Ahmed Bazmoul came after with a refutation, written one, where he titled it يا حلبي ويا حجوري أنتما من أبرز دعاة للفرقة والاختلاف وتمزيق الصف السلفي, calling out Halabi and Hajuri together, puts them together, that you both are from the clearest of those enduring to separate and divide the Salafi rank. And it's long, he writes, and he mentions so much, and he calls out Shaykh Yahya by name, that he was someone that did ifsad, corruption, and his main affair was that Shaykh Yahya did not submit to the advice of Shaykh Rabi' and didn't hold him with high regards. This is a long article relating to this, and other affairs relating to Ali Halabi as well. So anyone could return back to it, it's available. It's mentioned on the website manhaj.com, basically a summary of points of what was mentioned from this lecture, where it listed foundations derived of the descriptions of the Hajawira or the Hajuriyin and the Haddadiyya and the Halabi. And there was a question about supposedly someone from the followers of Yahya al-Hajuri. So he speaks about it, and then he says that Sheikh Abdullah Bukhari has old speech regarding Sheikh Mubil, and his Sheikh Mubil's old speech regarding the kingdom of Saudi Arabia. He goes, however, Sheikh Abdullah, recanted from that and clarified the matter. This is what's mentioned. At that time, he mentions when they were together that he recanted and clarified. Here also afterwards, when both Abdullah Bukhari and Sheikh Ahmed Bazmoul both started to refute one another and then started to bring out old issues that before they considered as being clarified and recanted from. Let's listen to that.
لماذا لم تستنكروا قول من وصف العلامة مقبل الوادع بأنه خارجي؟
So he says, why have you not been criticizing or disapproving the statement of the one that considered Shaykh Mubil rahimahullah of having the qualities of the Khawarij?
والذي لم يتب منه ويتراجع عنه.
And he says here clearly that he didn't recant it. And before he said, in that time, that he did, and he clarified. Here he says he didn't. And this is after they started to have a clash with one another, before they were united. Something to look at.
جعل خطأه معلقا بفهم غيره.
And he says the reason why he didn't clarify or didn't recant, because he made his mistake based upon the understanding of others. And this is what Shaykh was mentioning and others, that this is not a clear recantation from Abdullah Bukhari.
أن صريح كلامه وصف فيه العلامة مقبل بالخوارج.
And he says what was explicit from his speech is that he meant to describe Shaykh Mubil from being from Khawarij. And it's the same thing what Shaykh mentioned in criticizing, but at that time Shaykh was criticized by Ahmed Bazmoul, and also Bazmoul was criticizing that person from Maldives for bringing this up against Abdullah Bukhari by him saying that he clarified and recanted. This is if what's been mentioned from this transcript of that lecture.
خاصة وأنه أطلقها على العلامة مقبل رحمه الله تعالى بعد موته.
And he says especially the fact that he mentioned this after the death of Shaykh Mubil. And this also shows that it was something clear as an accusation from Abdullah Bukhari towards Shaykh Mubil. And there was a few more of that, where things that before that Shaykh Ahmed Bazmoul was criticizing Shaykh Yahya and got involved in the fitna of relations to, for example, Shaykh Yahya criticizing Shaykh Ubaid about his statement about Ka'b al-Malik. At that time, Bazmoul was using it against Shaykh Yahya, the likes of these affairs. of where he was speaking about the ulama, particularly Shaykh Ubaid and stuff. But later on, after the clash with Shaykh Ubaid and Bazmul, this particular point was used by Shaykh Bazmul against Shaykh Ubaid and those who defended him on that. So this is something to pay attention to, and this is something to know how the fitan was at that time and how it is now. Also, I wanted to mention the brother of Ahmed Bazmul, Shaykh Muhammad Bazmul. He didn't have much speech, but the only speech that I've seen was one general and one was specific. This is a specific one.
هنا السؤال يقول لي الأستاذ عن يحيى الحجوري. أنا لا أعرف يحيى الحجوري.
So a question comes to him about Yahya ibn Ali al-Hajuri. He says, I do not know Yahya ibn Ali al-Hajuri.
وأنا مثلكم أعتمد كلام أهل العلم فيه.
He said, I'm like you all. I rely upon the statements of the speech of the scholars concerning him.
من يعني أنا أسمع إيش قال الشيخ ربيع، إيش قال الشيخ عبيد، إيش قال الشيخ محمد بن هادي. أنا أمشي واتبع كلام العلماء.
He says, I hear what they say, Shaykh Rabi'a, Shaykh Ubaid, Shaykh Muhammad bin Hadi, and I follow their speech.
لأنه أنا ما عندي علم في هذا الشخص أو تعمق في معرفة أشياء وأخطاء. فأنا.
He said because he doesn't know this particular individual, like Shaykh Yahya, and he doesn't have the details about his errors or his affairs.
اتبع كلام العلماء ونصيحتي للكل أن يتبع كلام العلماء.
He said he follows the speech of scholars. His advice for all is to follow the speech of scholars. And here, from what's apparent, is that even if you have someone that could look into the matter or have some knowledge, but just follow the speech of the scholars, even if you don't have the details of what's being said, of the mistakes. And this is what happened, and look what this happened regarding him. And this is unfortunate. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to guide us all to that which is correct and make us people that do not blind follow other scholars just because of how great they are, especially when they're speaking about someone that was once praised by these individuals, and to suddenly just accept the words without jarh mufassar, or without clarity, or without knowing the authenticity of the details of these statements, especially knowing that it's coming from the likes of Arafat, who have taken bits and parts and pieces from Fali Harbi, and these individuals. Ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to allow us to be forgiven for our shortcomings and to guide us all. Subhanakallahumma bihamdik, nashhadu an la ilaha illa ant, wa nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk.